And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week. Happy Independence Day! And if you're saying, wait a minute, it's not until Monday, well, of course you're right. But if you think it's today, July the 2nd, you're also right, and in pretty good company, because John Adams, the second president of the United States and one of the principal authors of the Declaration of Independence, believed that July 2nd would be the day on which we celebrated American independence. Because on July 2nd, the Continental Congress, by unanimous vote, and think about that, in those days, each of the colonies got one vote. And so in order to get a unanimous declaration, you needed every one of the colonies, and therefore a majority of the delegates within each one to say yes. And they finally did on July 2nd, passing Richard Henry Lee of Virginia's resolution that declared us free and independent of the ties of Great Britain. 2 days later, July the 4th, the Congress passed the Declaration of Independence, which had been written by John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, principally Jefferson, Ben Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. And American independence began. A document that's so well worth reading again today, on Monday, over the weekend, because Adams told us that we should celebrate American independence with parades and bonfires and pyrotechnic displays and all of the things that we do today. So while we're doing all those very appropriate things, take a minute, maybe read through the Declaration of Independence and recognize the magnificent document that it is, because for the first time in world history, a nation set forth that our rights don't come from a potentate, don't come from a king, don't come from any earthly power, but come from God Himself. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, people, are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable or inalienable, as the debate went on in those days, rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The phrase life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness has been much debated as to where it actually came from, whether it came from John Locke, the famous philosopher, or from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. A little bit of both, most likely, if you read history a little bit more deeply. But the fundamental truth was life, liberty, and property were those things that were to be protected, because they were the rights that came from God and to which we gave government certain limited powers to protect. That is why we celebrate American independence. That is why this has been a nation truly blessed by God, the greatest nation in the history of civilization. And of course, life is at the pinnacle, the premier element of that famous phrase. And since we last recorded, it happened before last Saturday, but after we recorded last week's episode, the Supreme Court of the United States handed down their decision in the Dobbs case. Not a great shock or surprise, since sadly, unfortunately, and some would say properly in my judgment, criminally, it had been leaked previously. We saw the Supreme Court strike down the Roe versus Wade decision, something which in my judgment was long overdue. Roe versus Wade was never good law. And like Plessy versus Ferguson and the Dred Scott decision, which had been quote unquote settled law for a long time, it was finally overturned because it was fundamentally and inherently bad law. And the left's reaction has been unbelievable. The violence that's been suggested and occurred never happened in 1973 when the court passed Roe versus Wade, by the way, by 5 old white guys, something you don't hear much about said of the court today. But what you do here is incredibly racist language aimed towards Justice Clarence Thomas, calling him Uncle Clarence and saying that he would deny biracial marriage, although he happens to be in one himself, and all sorts of stuff that just completely obfuscates what the court actually did, which was not to say abortion is illegal in America, but rather to say that we the people, through our elected representatives in the various states, which is where it always should have been, will now have the opportunity to decide for ourselves exactly how that's going to look. But here's what gets revealed as the days go on. is the fact that most of the Democrat left now has a truly radical position on abortion. They want abortion at any time, for any reason, paid for by the taxpayers. That's a position not held by the vast majority of Americans. Even my pro-choice friends don't want that. They think there ought to be some reasonable restrictions on the right to abortion that they support. But you listen to the left and the stuff that comes out of their mouths now. For example, the mayor of Pittsburgh said that this was an assault on all human rights and put at risk transgender people, binary people, disabled. What is he talking about? It had nothing to do with those things whatsoever. I guess it's an opportunity for them to raise money off of the issue, and they certainly will do that. The Hollywood crowd is going to gather as much money as they possibly can to make that an issue this year. But fundamentally, this decision is a blessing. The over 60 million abortions, think about that have been performed in this country since Roe versus Wade, completely deny the fact that folks say it should be rare. Those are the pro-choice people. Those of us who are pro-life are rejoicing at the opportunity now to bring back a true respect for life, a post-Roe culture, and a support for women stuck in very difficult circumstances, and for their children, both when they are unborn and when they're actually born. Caring for them spiritually, physically, emotionally, and every other way that human beings can take care of each other. That is a true blessing. And by the way, for our friends on the far left who are threatening to leave the country, and some of us would say don't let the door hit you in the rear end, they're going to have a tough time finding a utopia for their pro-abortion views. They're not going to find it in Europe. In fact, they're not going to find it very many places in the world, because the United States actually had among the most liberal abortion laws prior to the decision last week by the court. And in many states, they still will. But good luck to them all. One piece of kind of down news this week: the market ended up June with the worst first half of any year in over a half a century. Think about that. With inflation hitting 40-year highs and the market completely skidding south, 401ks being eaten up and destroyed along the way, it's no wonder that people are focusing again on the Biden economy, with runaway inflation, with prices that are as a result through the roof, not only for gasoline, but for food, clothing, and other vital and essential elements of life. Folks are going to be thinking about that long and hard as we go into November. But here's the good news as a counter to the economic bad news right now. And that is that we still are a bright and shining city on a hill, a beacon of liberty and hope for the entire world. And we can reclaim all of the things that our founders set out in the Declaration of Independence, promoting life and liberty and happiness for every American and for folks around the world. And we can do that in restoring our economy, in promoting the vision of free people, free markets, free enterprise, and the prosperity that results from that, promoting individual liberty and personal responsibility in our individual lives, and ultimately making the American dream a true reality every day. And for that reason, this weekend is a great opportunity to celebrate American independence every minute of the weekend. No matter whether you're up at the mountains or down at the shore or just at home, enjoying friends, family, and community with barbecues and bonfires and fireworks on 4th of July night or whenever else it happens in your area. Enjoy, celebrate, be proud, because after all, we are Americans. And because of that, there's no better 60 seconds of this week. One more thing. As those of you that remember the iconic film Ferris Bueller's Day Off recall, he would right now be saying, "Are you still there?" And a little snippet from that film reminded me of this week's testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson, where Simone said,
"My best friend's sister's boyfriend's brother's girlfriend heard from this guy who knows this kid is going with the girl who saw Ferris pass out at 31 Flavors last night. I guess it's pretty serious."
Thank you, Simone.
No problem whatsoever.